Good evening. Today is Tuesday, September the 23rd, 2025, and the board meeting is now called to order. All board members are present except for Chrissy Hudson, who will join us online. At this time, Jolie McMahon, our student advisor, will read the land acknowledgement.
We gather today on the land of the Kalapuya, who are represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. The relationship between the Kalapuya people and this land continues unbroken to this day, and we offer gratitude for the land and for the generations present and past who have stewarded the land since time immemorial. We respectfully acknowledge and honor past, present, and future Native American and Indigenous students and staff of Salem-Keizer Public Schools. We invite you to join us in honoring these ancestral grounds and celebrating the resilience and strength of all Native American and Indigenous people.
Thank you. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Superintendent Castaneda, are there any modifications to the agenda?
No, there are none.
I will turn this portion of the agenda over to Deputy Superintendent Neves.
Good evening, Chair Richardson, board directors, student advisors, and Superintendent Castaneda. Tonight, I'd like to provide an update on our continued work to increase student engagement in learning, and specifically our Find Your Focus initiative, which began in the 2024-2025 school year. Let's begin with some statistics. Next slide. Did you know that young people receive an average of 237 notifications per day on their cell phone? Some students receive up to 4,500 daily notifications. Even if we consider a day to be 16 waking hours, that is an average of over 14 notifications per hour, or a notification every 4 minutes. When we remove those near constant interruptions to learning during the school day, research shows that students have better comprehension, lower levels of anxiety, and greater mindfulness, all factors that contribute to increased learning and achievement. We also know from research that our students are spending much of those waking hours on screens, and not for purposeful educational school-based activities. Children aged 8 to 12, so late elementary school through middle school, are averaging 4 to 5 hours of non-educational screen time per day. By the time we head into the high school years, our teenage students are averaging 7 to 8 hours of non-educational screen time per day. And more than half of those 7 to 8 daily hours for our teenagers are spent on social media. Much of the research on the impact of cell phone screen time is focused on engagement with social media apps, and for good reason. Studies have shown that exposure to social media doubles the risk of experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. While our students are with us each day, we are committed to supporting them to prioritize learning and their well-being, providing them practice with the skills they will need in the workforce, and building the interpersonal communication and collaboration skills they will need for a successful future. Next slide. So, with the start of this current school year, all Salem-Keizer schools are phone-free from bell to bell. On this and the next slide, you'll see some examples of school signs that communicate this expectation. This means that cell phones and other electronic communication devices are off and away from the start of the school day until the end. Another way to think of it is off and away from entrance to exit. Governor Kotek's recent executive order calls for all Oregon schools to be phone-free during the instructional day, and we're pleased to report to the board that our updated policy aligned with this mandate ahead of that executive order. In our policy, student acceptable use of electronic resources, we've outlined the specific devices, including smartwatches, earbuds, etc., that are included in the bell-to-bell expectation. Students continue to have access to their district-provided Chromebook to support curriculum and other academic activities. Some of our middle schools and all of our high schools are utilizing cell phone pouches to support students with this policy. Cell phone pouches limit student use of phones during the school day while allowing students to keep their phones with them in their backpacks. As always, students with individualized needs, such as individualized education programs or Section 504 plans, may have accommodations aligned to their specific needs and their goals. If a device is observed by staff during school hours, it will be confiscated by staff until redeemed by a parent guardian so that the school team and the family can make a plan. So as I've said before, as we go to the next slide, I'm a Salem-Keizer parent too, and I know that there are times when I need to reach my student during the day. Parents continue to be able to reach their children during the school day by calling the school office. I think sometimes we forget that we have landlines and we have them in our offices and our classrooms, and our staff in our schools are happy to make connections with students with whatever information those students need to successfully complete their day. Students who may realize they need to reach their parents during the day in secondary schools can utilize their district email to contact their parents at the email on file or request to use the school phone. We're really continuing to make sure that students and parents can connect with each other when they need to in order to communicate important information, and we have those systems in place. Next slide. If there's a school-based emergency, we need to ensure that all students are giving their full attention to the safety instructions from school staff. We also need to make sure that you as family members are receiving current and accurate information about the situation from our emergency response team. Those messages will come from the school or from district staff through Parent Square. Families, please make sure to keep your contact information up to date in Parent Square so you receive those messages in a timely manner. Next slide. So what happens when we find our focus? Last year, we surveyed staff and students at schools who implemented a bell-to-bell policy. Here are a few findings from those surveys. More than 75% of teachers reported increased student engagement with learning and an overall positive impact on the classroom dynamic. A teacher from Whitaker Middle School said, "Now that we are aware of how smartphones affect our students' focus and mental well-being, I'm so happy that we're doing something about it to protect the time they have at school to learn." And one last anecdote shared by a Salem-Keizer substitute teacher after substitute teaching at a high school last week. "I have to say, the change is unbelievable. The difference in the classrooms, at lunch, and even in the halls is so positive. Here's what I've noticed. Kids are doing their work. They're focused, completing assignments, and even asking questions. They're actually talking. I hear laughter, conversations, and real connection. The overall mood is calmer and kinder. They're reading. This week I've seen library books and novels come out during downtime instead of phones. Watching kids re-engage with school, with friends, and with themselves has been inspiring." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent Castaneda will address our final item on tonight's agenda.
And even before I do that, Chair, I would like to pause here because this is an opportunity for the board to ask questions directly of our team and discuss an issue that has been very much in the public mind. Our student advisors, no doubt, have questions and thoughts that they may wish to share. But this was, remember just a few months ago, this is one of the most talked about media events and school-related pieces of news that was happening in Oregon. And so I want to welcome you all into the conversation.
Jackson?
So I fully agree that the phone policy is a good thing. I think a lot of students don't like it, just to be plain and simple, just don't like it. But I've also heard a lot of like sighs of resignation as they realize that it's something that is needed. I would just like to ask about yonder pouches, because what I've heard from pretty much everyone I've talked to about yonder pouches is that it can feel like sometimes that because of the very small group of people who didn't listen to the phone policy and didn't listen to teachers and would rather get in trouble than put their phone away, it feels like the yonder pouches have been forced onto everyone. I'm just wondering if is there any way that we could have taken that money and used it to focus on those specific students rather than the whole group?
Thank you so much for that question, Jackson. So 2 things that I will share about the implementation of the cell phone pouches. One is we started a pilot during the 24-25 school year. There were a few schools who, as they looked at how they were going to implement cell phone restrictions, both at our middle schools where we were already bell-to-bell by policy, and then also at our high schools where last year there was still some flexibility during non-instructional time. Those schools, under the leadership of their principals, said, this is a strategy that we believe will help us to support our students in increasing their engagement, staying focused, and allowing our teams to be focused on teaching and learning rather than chasing cell phones. Following that pilot, some of the data we just looked at, which was from some of the schools who participated in the pilot, there were additional schools who also said, we believe that this will be an improvement for us. Some schools who worked on bell-to-bell policies last year and felt like they needed another level of process inside their school to support students, to support teachers. We also know that our ultimate goal is to ensure that students are learning and are learning at high levels. We're hearing from teachers and from some students that while they may not have selected cell phone pouches or cell phone restrictions, that they're noticing that they're engaging differently in school when those distractions are not there. We're also seeing that when students haven't missed a day of notifications because no one has access to their phones during the day, we're also seeing a calmer environment. There's not so much anxiety about the things that students have missed. And so that's really what drove the decisions that the principals made at their schools to implement an additional layer of support for students. With any policy that we implement in a school, we want to give our principals, our teachers, and our school teams the opportunity to look at various additional tools and resources that might support them with that. And the cell phone pouches, from our perspective, are something that does that.
Thank you.
Jolie?
I would like to say I have, since the school year started, I have definitely seen an improvement in engagement. However, at South, we have to have our phones in the yonder pouch the whole day. And that includes lunch, unless you are going to a specific place off campus for lunch. And what I've noticed has been the biggest pushback from students is not being able to have access to your phone at lunch, since it isn't designated teaching time, and they feel like their lunch should be their free space and like they should have access to it. But I don't know how different schools are managing that specifically, but that's what I've noticed has been the biggest pushback.
And I would share that that is a change for high schools between the 24-25 school year and this year. The executive order would have required us to limit students' cell phone access during the entire instructional day. So when we say bell to bell, it's not just of the class periods or things that are deemed specifically instructional time, but it is from when the school day starts So at most high schools, 8:30 till the school day ends at about 3:30. And so the exception to that would be students who are leaving campus, of course, because they're no longer with us in their instructional day. But it is a change, and we know that students are experiencing that this year.
Director Harnish?
Yes, first of all, I just want to say thank you to the district and staff for implementing this program and knowing how hard it has been. And it's been a topic of many conversations in this room as well as in other settings. And I also really appreciate our ability to be able to implement the executive order so quickly. And so I just want to say thank you for that. I have kind of two questions that are kind of the same ilk. One is how is the district going about sort of checking in with students and parents on the implementation over the year? And then I'd also love to see regular reports in the boardroom about how that is going. So that's maybe more of a request than a question, but would love that.
Yes, so we'll continue with some surveys with students, staff, and we can include families to understand how they're experiencing this particular policy and the implementation, particularly at our schools who are implementing cell phone pouches, because we want to look at what we're learning in terms of that implementation. And of course, we'll come back to the board at any time and share updates.
Director Fuller?
Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to, this, in the high schools, there's just been lots of fun things that have come out of this that I don't think we expected. I've been invited to play board games at lunch at North with students. They have in the common area, they have a bunch of board games set out, and when I was asked, I was like, heck yeah, I can get behind that. But I just think there's just a lot of opportunities that this brought us that I think we're gonna be not necessarily surprised, but just really grateful for as they develop. So it's having some positive effects as well, especially when I win the board games.
Dr. Sandy Gary?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. I mean, this is a good thing because this gives an opportunity for our students to sit down and literally hold one-to-one conversation, use human language and talk to each other, listen to each other. Any type of discourse that goes on with each other is one more opportunity to understand each other better. And, sometimes conversation is more than texting. You have to use all your five senses to communicate with each other, right? The body language, etc. That's one big benefit. I mean, I also got an opportunity to sit and listen to some of the smaller rural school boards and school districts in our county and other counties also, just because of this. And not everybody has a yonder pouch approach. Some of them have achieved 100% adherence to this particular thing even before the executive order came out, by using it as an educational opportunity and giving them 3 opportunities. Like first time somebody will hold, then sometimes they'll take it, and then their parents will have to come and get it. So they have found a way to get the buy-in, because I'm all for buy-in rather than an executive order or somebody telling me what to do. So could this, there's nothing we can do about it. This is the law of the land. You have to follow it. But when it comes to such a large school system, perhaps my approach would have been, maybe we could have implemented it and rolled it out sooner and got a good buy-in from the students and the family, as opposed to waiting for an executive order before the school vacation and then kind of feels like it's imposed upon us. So that's one piece. How much is it going to cost us is the second part. Is I'm wearing a school board hat and saying how much it's going to cost us, what lessons we can learn from smaller rural school districts where they have implemented without a yonder pouch. And are there ways in which we can help the students design some of those pouches? Like, one of those good old days, we used to have a quilt with socks where you keep all your belongings or mailboxes, and then you go pick it up at the end of the day. Something simpler where the students could have been involved in coming up with the design and what works for them. So there's a buy-in. I'm just thinking aloud, what if they lose the pouch, then we have to replace it? It's, it's all kind of, the sustainable expense is what I'm thinking. Any thoughts on that? And how are we going to, they've got 37,000 kids, and 37,000 yonder pouch times $40 or $30 will be expensive.
So in terms of cost, the Yonder pouches are approximately $30 per student, and it's a one-time cost. We purchase the Yonder pouches just like textbooks or Chromebooks or anything else. Those are expected to be returned at the end of the school year and reissued at the next year. And so there is a cost for replenishment, but that happens with all of our other fees. Same things with uniforms and everything else that is provided as part of our educational program. So that's in terms of cost. I want to be clear that we're not implementing Yonder pouches in any elementary schools, and we are implementing them in secondary schools and secondary schools who have elected to implement this as part of their school program. So the original funds came from our student investment account to support our student engagement and student attendance, and so we know that that's a really important piece around student well-being as we looked at those initial data slides, and we expect to see that we'll see positive outcomes from that, both reported by the adults and students in the buildings.
Director Fuller?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question because I heard you say in the beginning of your presentation that this was a policy, or the executive order was something that we were in a sense already complying with through our policy. And then I heard Director Chandagari say that it would have been great to have this in place before the executive order, which we did. Is that correct?
So in the spring, the other high schools who are not implementing Yonder, so we'll use our student advisors as an example. Jackson's school had already implemented Yonder pouches. Jolie's school started implementing them this year, right?
Okay.
So all of the principals had decided at the high schools that they would use Yonder pouches. That aligns with the policy of bell-to-bell or entrance to exit.
Okay.
They had made that decision in the spring. Executive order came out over the summer, and then we just implemented it. So it's sort of like a wacky timeline in that way.
But we already, majoritively speaking, students were expected to not use their phones during the school day anyway. Is that correct?
We were bell-to-bell K-8 last school
K-8,
year.
right.
In high school, it was during class times. They were allowed previously, if they didn't have cell phone pouches in their schools, to use their phones during passing periods and lunch.
Got it. That was the trick, passing periods and lunches. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Chair, may I add something to that?
Yes.
I was at North last night for a pretty wonderful event involving the Japanese Sister City delegation, and I had an opportunity to talk to a number of North staff about the pouches, and I think this has a bearing a little bit on your question of did we need the pouches? While I know they're getting mixed reviews in all schools and amongst all users, this is what I hear from teachers so often. You have taken the responsibility for monitoring it out of my hands and put it at the front door. And that's the thing that other solutions don't accomplish, because if it's in your bag or if it's in a shoe holder on the back of a door, if you're a high school teacher or a middle school teacher, you're still managing it every single period, every single student. And I do think there are very few gifts that we get to give our teachers right now when their work is so important and so hard. One of them is saying, we got this. This one big distraction, we've got it for you. You can focus on the rest of your work. And it's just an additional observation that was really punctuated in talking to the North staff yesterday, who to a person said, this is the best opening we've had in years. This is the strongest culture we've had in years. And so I will close just briefly by saying I really want to acknowledge our middle and high school principals because they took the lead. And I know that Salem-Keizer sometimes gets credit for getting out in front of this. it wasn't Salem-Keizer. It was our principals who said, there is something happening and we have to take responsibility for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Richardson. Wait, Chrissy Hudson has her hand raised.
Director Hudson?
Thank you so much. So just to clarify quick, it's not an actual district policy where each principal has to mandate the yonder pouches. It's still their option how much they enforce it to this level or at a lesser level. Is that correct? I can extend my question if you would like.
Will you just clarify what you mean by the enforcement piece?
Mm-hmm. So, and I hate to give a lot of examples, but where we are now, where it's, everybody, the same rule applies to every student, yonder pouches at the door, as opposed to maybe their culture in their school causes them to end up having more issues with, say, broken yonder pouches or whichever, and a higher need for families to have to reimburse and purchase new yonder pouches. And they decide, well, you know what, we just want to empower our teachers to be able to give warnings. And if it's a continual problem with a particular student, then we'll mandate that student to having to use the yonder pouches again. Is that something that exists, it sounds like, or is it truly a district policy where every principal, high school and middle school, must implement yonder pouches at the door for every student?
So our yonder pouches are being used at all of our high schools. All of our high school principals decided to use yonder pouches, and some of our middle schools. There are 6 middle schools who are currently implementing yonder pouches. Our policy applies for all of our students. We are cell phone free, bell to bell. If a student has an individualized an IEP or a Section 504 plan, that can be considered by those teams to determine what the accommodations might be. I want to just be clear that our principals will be supporting the policy which aligns with the executive order for all of our students from the beginning to the end of the day. Of course, with any implementation, we will be conducting sort of cycles of continuous improvement where we're learning from what's happening. They're learning from each other about effective implementation. We showed some of the signage that's in the schools. That's, they're sharing those resources with each other and learning from the different implementations that are happening there.
Thank you. And I've appreciated the community feedback as well. I know I've got a lot from teachers, a ton from students, so I really appreciate you two student leaders there. Bless you for always putting in your info and feedback. It's very helpful. And then I know the other concern is just always safety that we hear a lot. Well, hey, we may not as a parent think that the kiddos should have full access to electronics if they're not mature enough to handle it and manage it appropriately themselves. But what if there was a safety concern? They no longer have that recourse to be able to reach out to their families. Have we had much flow of those concerns and questions as a district? And I'm curious how we would be answering those if we have. Does that make sense, my question?
Yes, of course. So I would reiterate what I shared before around our safety policies in terms of an emergency that is school-based. We need to make sure that in those moments, actually, that students are not on their cell phones, that they're attending to the adults who are moving the school through our safety protocols. We want to make sure that families, you are getting accurate and timely information from school and district staff about the emergency response. And we want to make sure that we're able to get all of our students back to you safely in the event that there's ever an emergency at school. So that will be the case regardless of any other executive orders or things like that, that we want to make sure that our students are able to attend to our safety policies, safety protocols, so that we can communicate with you as quickly as possible.
Dr. Sandagiri?
So this executive order one is the telephone, but it also refers to other devices which can be, what is it, the word, I forget, connected to the internet, I guess, or Wi-Fi, like whatever people wear in the ears and watches and so many other little devices, right? How are we going to take all that into consideration when it comes to implementation, or how are we going to continue to educate our students and the families? Because some of the responsibility, perhaps the family also has to step up, not to purchase fancy equipment for their kids, which they will try to bring it in. Any thoughts on what families can do, how not to buy those, or maybe buy it and keep it at home rather than showing to school? Because we can't catch everything.
Yeah, our school teams are doing an amazing job of having regular communication with families. They started that communication in the spring, it went through the summer, and the policy does include those other personal electronic communication devices, and so those are expected, just like phones, to be off and away. In a school that has a Yonder pouch, those can be stored in there as well, so those are safe and moving with the student during the day. We, of course, absolutely want the partnership of our families to help reinforce those expectations and limit the use of those devices, and keeping them at home means they're extra safe at home as well.
One other thing, do you mind commenting on the school buses or transportation? What does the executive order say, and what does our policy say in terms of, bus driver is driving and how are they going to keep track? One of the staff actually asked me, so.
Yes, our school bus drivers are not expected to manage cell phone use by students. That would be outside of the scope, and we need them focused on safely driving students to and from school. We know that if there are cases where there are behavior infractions or problems on a bus due to electronic devices or any other behavior, then that will be reported to our school administrators, and they will follow up according to our code of conduct.
This is really good for our children to be one less or one huge source of distraction, because that itself will free up enough to kind of focus on not just the instruction, but also to connect with each other, connect with the teachers, and learn to kind of hold good conversations with each other and make friends and things like that. So not only it will have a huge boost on mental health, but also hold real conversation, and also make friends, support each other and be kind to each other. There are ways in which this will really free up rather than having to rely on watching YouTube again and again. The same algorithm will kind of mess up your head, right? So this is a good thing. At least 12 hours of, or 6 hours or 8 hours, they can have some time which is good for their brain, in my opinion. Thank you for doing this.
Director Guzman-Ortiz.
Very briefly, I recognize that not all family members might have access to email or navigate that very well. So I know I just kind of want to name that in one of the challenges, right, when we're relying on Chromebooks. But I also want to affirm that they will use it, because my child has emailed me trying to be persuasive about some asks. So I know that they are. I know that they do.
I just want to say that I've heard from staff as well as students that you hear conversations now in the hallways and at lunch, and how productive that has been, other than seeing kids buried in their cell phones, running into each other and not talking to each other. So I think that is going really, really well from what I'm hearing in the community. I want to thank you very much for all of your information about the usage of our cell phones in our schools. Our final update for the quarter ended June 30th, 2025, Superintendent Castaneda will address that.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. We are going to do a quarter 4 closeout. So this is for the last year. Normally, we report a little closer to the end of the quarter. This ended in June, but closing out an entire fiscal year actually takes quite a bit more work for the team because they're reconciling every single item. And so we're pleased to bring you our quarter 4 update. We're now getting pretty good at this as a board, and there is a chart that's coming, and you're going to know what it looks like because you've seen it many times now. So this is our quarter 4 update. And what you'll see is that there's a lot to be grateful and proud of here. And I first just really want to acknowledge the finance team. They have been doing such an excellent job at forecasting. And I want to give you one example. At the start of last year, so last fiscal year, they were within $9 million of accuracy in a $1 billion budget of our expenses. So we're talking about less than 0.5% of margin of error. That is excellent forecasting and budget work right there. You'll also see a few other things that I would like you to notice. Even as proud as I am and grateful as I am of the financial services team, I cannot say that luck did not play a role in having our expense and revenue line be identical. But you see that is actually what happened in our closeout here. It's really excellent work. And what you'll also see is that our ending fund balance is very healthy. It's slightly above policy targets. And what I want to remind you of is what we told you when we were approving this year's budget. And what we told you was that we were at severe risk of not being able to build a budget within policy targets for next year. That's how fast we anticipate starting to burn down that $96 million reserve. And it's because while our expenses and revenue is balanced for the year we closed, it is not balanced for the year we're in. And this is not a surprise. It's not a reason to panic. It's not a sudden change in our economic condition, but it is something that we need to be paying attention to as a community and as a board. This is a really strong closeout. I will say almost every district in Oregon wishes that this was their closeout story. We have districts in Oregon that are facing far more serious issues for right now. And our team and your work, the work of our community and our schools has made this possible for us. Now our job is to do everything we can to hold on to as much of this healthy condition as is possible. So I want to pause here and see if you guys have any questions. We're happy to answer questions if you have them.
Director Sandegari.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the credit goes to you and your team because what we went through, all the necessary, I don't want to say the necessary surgery, come repair after that, you know, in order to kind of work through that, bring us back to health, was a big role in my opinion, at least the way I saw and based on others which you have shared with us. And really, I think even our community got educated into understanding. As I said in one of the previous meetings there, everybody I met, at least a lot of them have shared what the end fund balance looks like for you guys now. So it's become almost like a common parlance. So I really think keeping that financial education for all of us, not just in the board, but in the community will help all of us to understand the financial reality that we are dealing with and the factors that are outside over which we may or may not have much control. The demands that are put on our district or in education, public schools in general, some of them are funded, some of them are not even funded, but still those demands have to be, obligations are there. So I think that's what I understand from this. So thank you very much. And we will, if the more you keep giving us homework, we'll keep reading, at least I'll read, and so that I can learn and go along. Because it took me a few years to figure out all these things, to be honest. Even though I got elected, it takes a while to kind of figure out and understand what is going on. So I would like to guard the end fund balance as a sacred entity that way, because sometimes we may have a temptation to kind of dig into that and balance the budget, meet the policy, but it's a kind of a slippery slope in my opinion. So that's what I would see what all we can do to preserve that end fund balance because of uncertain future at any level and every level, federal, state, etc.
Thank you.
Two other quick things I'd like to make sure you notice in this. One of them is that this includes a $15 million interfund transfer for the building purchase, which we discussed in the spring. And this remains I believe, such a wise decision on the part of the district and the board. That building is a real educational asset, and we're going to be able to use it well. And it was an excellent price for this district. The $15 million that it cost will eventually be offset by sales of property that you take action on over the course of coming months. In the meantime, the reason that you don't see a major change is because we had a positive May revenue adjustment from the district. And we had some investments that performed very well, and those two things taken together actually ended up not even seeing the impact on our ending fund balance within this fiscal year. So there's just a lot of good that's going to come of acquiring such a valuable asset, good that comes from starting to surplus buildings that are no longer ones we now or will ever use again, and good that comes from the good that's going to happen in that building for students who really deserve a great and inspiring educational space and program to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank the superintendent, our leadership team, and all of our staff across the district and our students for a great opening of the school year. It's been really, really positive, and I'm looking forward to hearing more and more and more positive ongoings in your schools. Also, it's just been great to hear about our financial update. And I think we're just in great shape, and we have the right people in the right positions overseeing our finances. Thank you so very much. It is currently 6:43 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.